Good morning, my dear students. Let us start from where we have ended our previous discussion, and that is bioavailability. Now, in this slide, you will see that once you give a dose, the dose is, as I mentioned before, that it will be destroyed a little bit in the mouth cavity, in the esophagus, then in the gut, then further it's not absorbed and going to the in the gut wall, that means in the intestinal wall. Further it is metabolized in the liver before completing the absorption, and lastly in the lung, and ultimately it reaches systemic circulation. So if you have given 500 milligram dose of a drug, and if you think that 50 milligram of the drug is only available in the systemic circulation, it means 50 divided by 500 into 100, that means 10% is the bioavailability of that particular drug. Again I am repeating because it's a mathematical thing. After giving 500 milligram and going through the process of this destruction at different level, once it reaches systemic circulation, if the dose becomes 50 milligram from 500 milligram, then the bioavailability will be expressed in terms of percentage, and that percentage is 50 as a numerator divided by 500 as a denominator into 100. So that will give you the percentage, and that percentage is ultimately coming to 50 by 5, that means 10%. So 10% is going to be the availability, hypothetical availability or bioavailability of the drug. Now, for drugs taken by different routes other than the IV route, the extent of absorption and the bioavailability must be understood in order to determine what dose will induce the desired therapeutic effect. So considering that, you have to fix the next dose or the multiple dose. It will also explain why the same dose may cause a therapeutic effect by one route but a toxic or no effect by another route. So once a drug is administered via intravenous route, and once it is given in a bolus dose, in the right hand side you will see the concentration time curve will show you in this curve. It will show you the downward slope of this. This is the slope, and the initial part is the part distribution followed by the excretion, that is elimination. So the area which is coming under this zone is known as AUC, or area under the curve. Whereas if you continuously infuse a drug via intravenous route to maintain a certain concentration, the curve will show some different look, and it will be going like this, and then it started following the path of elimination, and the area is coming under this is called area under the curve. While if you see this one, here the drug is prescribed either via oral route or subcutaneous route or via intramuscular route, and initial part is absorption and distribution, and then it's followed by elimination. One of the important part of this elimination is excretion. Now the part which is coming under this curve is also known as area under the curve. Now if a particular preparation, drug preparation, has both forms, that means oral form and the intravenous form, then the bioavailability of the drug can be determined very easily. How? AUC of this oral preparation divided by AUC of the intravenous preparation of the same drug. Suppose the drug is paracetamol, and this IV preparation will definitely give you around 100%. The area under the curve will be more, and it will be multiplied by 100. So AUC of oral preparation divided by AUC of intravenous preparation of the same drug multiplied by 100 will give you bioavailability of that particular drug. There is a term we will hear or you will read in some books, indices of bioavailability. The indices of bioavailability is determined by few factors. The first factor is called Cmax, that means the concentration maximum. This part. Then the time taken by the drug to achieve this highest point, that is Tmax. It is coming around here. And then the area under the curve. So these three things will determine the area under the curve. Cmax and Tmax are known as indices of bioavailability. Drug formulations are considered to be pharmaceutically equivalent if they contain the same active ingredients and identical in strength, concentration and dosage form. The pharmaceutically equivalent drug formulation are considered to be bioequivalent when the rates and extent of bioavailability of the active ingredients in the two formulations do not differ significantly when tested by standard procedures. Such substances are likely to be therapeutically equivalent. Bioavailability is reduced if absorption is reduced or if the drug is metabolized before getting into the systemic circulation. And as I mentioned before, all the factors which are modifying the absorption of a drug are responsible for modification of the bioavailability of a drug. So from the part of bioavailability, we'll shift to the next part, that is called volume of drug distribution. That is the part D of ADME. Now, our body is considered to be a multi-compartment model, and as it is been shown here, plasma contains around 4 liters of fluid, whereas interstitial fluid is around 10 liters and intracellular fluid is around 28 liters. So in total it is around 42 to 45 liters of total fluid available in our body. Drugs may distribute into any one of the following components, either plasma, interstitial fluid, intracellular fluid, or among everything. But that will cause a little bit of problem. The problem lying in the fact that it is difficult for us to calculate mathematically the actual volume of distribution of a drug. And hence, as we are mathematically a little bit poor, we have taken a simple method. We have done, or we have assumed, that our body is basically a single component, and drugs appear to distribute in the body as if it was a single compartment. The magnitude of the drug's distribution is given by the term called apparent volume of distribution, which is abbreviated or indicated as VD, and by the term VD is expressed as amount of drug in the body, which is basically the dose of the drug, divided by the plasma concentration at that particular hour. That means if the dose of the drug is 50 milligram and plasma concentration of the drug is 50 milligram per liter, this apparent volume of distribution is going to be 1 liter, because 50 divided by 50 and milligram will be divided by milligram, and liter will go up as a numerator. So apparent volume of distribution is basically expressed in terms of liter or milliliter. And that mathematical calculation you can do it from here. In the left hand side, which has been depicted in the figure, if you do this as simple mathematics, you can calculate the apparent volume of distribution. But if you place certain charcoals, then this apparent volume of distribution will take the shape of the actual volume of distribution. That means these charcoals will soak those drugs or absorb those drugs, and hence you will get probably the proper volume of distribution. But mostly whenever we are uttering the term volume of distribution, we are trying to indicate apparent volume of distribution. Lipid insoluble drugs usually do not enter cells, and V approximates this extracellular fluid volume. There are different examples like streptomycin and gentamicin. Distribution is not only a matter of dilution, but it also related to binding and sequestration. Drugs extensively bound to plasma proteins are largely restricted to the vascular compartment and have low values of volume of distribution. And such examples are diclofenac sodium, some oral anticoagulant like warfarin. And in these cases, if drug toxicity happens, you have to take help of hemodialysis. A large value of this apparent volume of distribution indicates that larger quantity of drug is present in extravascular tissue. Drugs sequestered in other tissues may have the volume much more than total body water or even body mass. Examples like digoxin, which is showing 6 liter per kg, propranolol, which is showing around 4 liter per kg, because most of the drugs is present in other tissues and plasma concentration is low because it is already distributed. Therefore, in case of poisoning, drugs with larger volume of distributions are not easily removed by hemodialysis. Only those drugs are easily removed with the help of hemodialysis, concentrated within plasma or within the blood vessels. Different pathological states like congestive heart failure, uremia, cirrhosis of liver may alter the volume of distribution by altering distribution of body water, permeability of membranes, binding proteins, or by accumulation of metabolites that displace the drug from binding sites. More precise multi-compartment models for drug distribution have been worked out, but the single compartment model as described above is simple and fairly accurate for many drugs. So as undergraduate, we will only concentrate on that. The factors which are governing this apparent volume of drug distributions are lipid water partition coefficient of the drug, pK value of the drug, degree of plasma protein binding, affinity towards different tissues, fat lean body mass ratio, which can vary with age, sex and obesity, and diseases like congestive heart failure, uremia and cirrhosis. There is one more term existing in this part of distribution, and that is called redistribution. There are some highly lipid soluble drugs and they get initially distributed to organs with high blood flow, like in brain, heart, kidney. Later, less vascular but more bulky tissues like muscle, fat take up the drug. Plasma concentration falls and the drug is withdrawn from the highly perfused sites. If the site of action of the drug was in one of the highly perfused organs, redistribution results in termination of the drug action. Greater the lipid solubility of the drug, faster is its redistribution. Anesthetic action of thiopentone sodium, which is basically an inducing agent for general anesthesia, injected intravenously, is terminated within minutes due to redistribution. It is relatively short hypnotic action and lasting 6 to 8 hours, is exerted by oral diazepam or nitrazepam due to redistribution despite their elimination T-half of 30 hours. The term T-half we'll discuss later, but by the term T-half we mean the time by which concentration of a drug declines by its half, and plasma T-half means the time by which the plasma concentration of a drug declines by its half. The penetration into blood and CSF can be seen with most of the drugs. The capillary endothelial cells in brain have tight junctions and leak large paracellular spaces. Further, an investment of neural tissue covers the capillaries. Together they constitute the so-called blood-brain barrier. A similar blood-CSF barrier is located in the choroid plexus, and the capillaries are lined by choroidal epithelium having right junctions. These junctions are very tight. Both these barriers are usually lipoidal and limit the entry of non-lipid soluble drugs like streptomycin, neostigmine. Only lipid soluble drugs therefore are able to penetrate and have action on the central nervous system. In addition to this, efflux transporters like P-glycoprotein, anion transporters present in brain and the choroidal vessels extrude many drugs that enter brain by other processes and serve to augment the protective barrier against potentially harmful xenobiotics. There is also an enzymatic blood-brain barrier, that is monoamine oxidase, cholinesterase and some other enzymes are present in the capillary walls in the cells lining them. They do not allow catecholamines or acetylcholines or serotonin to enter the brain in the active form. The blood-brain barrier is deficient at the chemoreceptor trigger zone, in the medulla oblongata, and at certain periventricular sites like anterior hypothalamus. Exit of drugs from the CSF and brain, however, is not dependent on lipid solubility and is rather unrestricted. This is due to bulk flow of CSF along with the drug dissolved in it and back into the blood through the arachnoid villi. Furthermore, non-specific organic anion and cation transport processes operate at the choroid plexus. One more thing is important in relation to this apparent volume of distribution, that is passage across placenta, because pregnancy is one of the most important physiological phenomenon happening in our life. So, the placental membranes are lipoidal and allow free passage of lipophilic drugs while restricting hydrophilic drugs. The placental efflux, P-glycoprotein and other transporters like MRP3, they serve to limit fetal exposure to maternally administered drugs. Placenta is a site for drug metabolism as well, which may lower modify exposure of the fetus to the administered drugs. However, restricted amounts of non-lipid soluble drugs when present in high concentration or for long period in maternal circulation gain access to the fetus. Some influx transporters also operate at the placenta. Thus, it is an incomplete barrier, and almost any drug taken by the mother can affect the fetus or the newborn. And that thing we'll discuss while discussing teratogenicity and the drugs which can be useful or which can be given in pregnancy. And that will take one more class to discuss it in details. So this is the picture, the blood flow, capillary permeability. Here you see in endothelial cell, in liver capillary, it is freely flowing. It is freely flowing, but in case of this one, it's a tight junction. In brain, it is restricted. So restriction of the drug distribution is happening at the brain capillary. The same thing is not happening in the liver capillary. There are some examples of VDs of some of the very common drugs like phenytoin, like digoxin. You do not have to remember this, but remember this volume is basically more than the total volume in the body. Now let's come to the next part of pharmacokinetics, that is plasma protein binding. And as I mentioned before, that albumin and alpha 1 acid glycoprotein are the two proteins which are commonly present in the plasma, and they are binding with the respective drugs. And beside this, there are beta globulin, which is also playing a very key role. So the drugs are basically, the acidic drugs are basically binding with albumin, and extent of binding is depending on the individual compound. No generalization for a pharmacological or chemical class can be made. For example, the binding percentage of some of the benzodiazepines are different, like in alprazolam it is 70%, but in diazepam it is 99%. But they are belonging to the same group. Now, why these things are clinically significant? Highly plasma protein bound drugs are largely restricted to the vascular compartment, because protein bound drugs does not cross membranes, and hence, as I mentioned before, in case of drug poisoning, you can treat this patient with hemodialysis. The amount bound is basically depending on free drug concentration, the protein concentration, and affinity for binding sites. So that will give you another clinical picture. Just think, albumin is for the acidic drug. There are two acidic drugs, one is aspirin, another one is warfarin, and both of them are having affinity for the same site of aspirin, that is called warfarin site of aspirin. Aspirin is basically working as a kind of receptor. So from here onwards, from this part of pharmacokinetics, we are entering into an arena of pharmacodynamics. Now, when due to some situation like a prosthetic mitral valve is probably given, or you have to prevent embolism, you are very cautious about that. So for that, you may have to prescribe anticoagulant like warfarin as well as antiplatelet drug like aspirin to the same patient. Now what will happen? Both of them will try to bind with the same protein, that is albumin. Now who will win this race? Aspirin. Why? Because aspirin has a greater affinity. Now once aspirin will tightly bind with this albumin, the concentration of free warfarin will be increased in your plasma, and that will lead to severe toxicity like bleeding through different orifices. So that is another clinical reason why one has to know the significance of plasma protein binding. The generally expressed plasma concentration of the drug referred to bound as well as free drug. The degree of protein binding should be taken into account while relating this to the concentration of the drug that are active in vitro. Mostly, whenever we are talking about the active fraction of the drug, we mean that it's a free fraction. Bound fraction is usually the inactive fraction of the drug. High degree of protein binding generally makes the drug long acting because bound fraction is not available for metabolism or for excretion unless it is actively extracted by liver or kidney tubules. Glomerular filtration does not reduce the concentration of the free form in the efferent vessels because water is also filtered. Active tubular secretion, however, removes the drug without the attendant solvent. The concentration of the free drug falls, bound drug dissociates and is eliminated, resulting in a higher renal clearance value of the drug than the total renal blood flow. The same is true of active transport of highly extracted drugs in liver. Plasma protein binding in this situation acts as a carrier mechanism and it hastens drug elimination, excretion of penicillin, metabolism of lignocaine. These are the common examples. Highly protein bound drugs are not removed by hemodialysis and it needs special techniques. That means the drug not only has to be restricted within plasma component, but it has to be in the free fraction for hemodialysis. Otherwise, the drug toxicity may continue and you have to take some other options. And I would like to conclude my today's presentation with the topic called tissue storage. The drugs may also accumulate in specific organs by active transport or get bound to specific tissue constituents. There are certain drugs like chloroquine, which is an antimalarial drug. It is accumulated in the liver and retina. Digoxin, it is concentrated in kidney. The drugs like chlorpromazine or isoniazid is stored in brain. Iodine is stored in thyroid. So the drug sequestrate, this type of thing is also known as sequestration. So the drugs sequestrated in various tissues are unequally distributed, tend to have larger volume of distribution and longer duration of action. Some may exert local toxicity due to high concentration, that is tetracycline like drugs. These are deposited in bone and teeth, and that is the reason why tetracyclines are not prescribed in children, because they are preventing growth of teeth and bone at the very early age. Chloroquine in retina, that means a person who is on chloroquine for a long time, like those are having rheumatoid arthritis like things, patient should always check their eyes to a eye specialist. Otherwise, retinal toxicity, the chance of retinal toxicity is pretty high with chloroquine. Streptomycin is causing similar kind of damage in vestibular apparatus because it is being stored there. So, in brief, these are the first part of pharmacokinetics, and I am concluding my presentation with AD, that means absorption, distribution. I have included bioavailability within this, and I have also added one more part, that is plasma protein binding. So in my next class probably I will come up with the next topic, that is metabolism. This term is quite known to you, but in drug pharmacology this term metabolism is also known as biotransformations. So the next class will be on biotransformation.